Happy New Year to everybody out there. I think we've got about 40 different locations online this morning, and I'm delighted to take this opportunity to talk to you. This is, if you like, a new development in our direct command communication. I've had the opportunity to speak to a couple of the majors courses at Canungra, etc., using this means, but I think it's important to provide an opportunity to get intent out there directly where possible. And the beauty of our great new resource at the Cove is that this will be online and available for those who have been unable to talk with us this morning. I do make the point, and those of you who know me should know that I'm frank and direct and will be very honest with you. We are, of course, talking on an unclassed means, so there may be some questions or directions that you may wish to take me that we can take offline at another period. What I've decided to do in terms of passing to you my intent is reflect on our performance in 2017, and that will draw out some lessons and observations. And then I intend to give you a few of my thoughts about priorities and direction for 2018. I intend to follow up on this webinar with an update to my command philosophy, so again that you can digest that in more detail. That said, most of what is in my written command directive is really about the way I attempt to approach command, and much of that will remain valid. So scope of today's presentation, as I said, reflections on 2017, some intent for 2018, and time for your questions, which again I look forward to answering as many of those directly as I can today, but also am willing to take those offline and get back to you through formation commanders, unit commanders, TE commanders, and so on. So again, stressing straight talk, but in the unclassed forum, and we may need to take some things up later on offline. Let me start with the reflections on 2017. One of the great privileges that comes with my job is the opportunity to move around the command, perhaps more than anybody else in Army, along with my then RSM, Dave Galloway. That included a particularly important period of more than 2 weeks in the field in Shoalwater Bay, seeing us in our real place of work, where clearly we had the 3rd Brigade, the primary training audience in the box, but everything from the 1st Division through the 1st Brigade, 3rd, 3, 6, 16 and 17 in action in the Combat Training Centre. So I feel to be in a pretty good position to be able to describe to you where I think we're at. I want to start with a positive expression, and this isn't to excessively pump up our own tyres, because I am going to tell you some things that I think we need to improve, but it's also important that we reflect on what we are doing and what we are doing well. And up front, I'd make the comment to you, and I said this to the Chief of the Army just the other day, there is no question in my mind that we have the best Army we've ever had. Now that, again, I don't want to come across like some elderly uncle on tour, but we have well-educated people who are clever, who are innovative, and who are asking questions. The quality of our training is very high, and in the broad, the quality of our equipment is very good. Although, again, I am not immune to understanding that in many cases the equipment is not universally spread across the command or the Army. But in the broad, I think we're travelling very well. And I want to give you a few examples of what I would call that sort of best practice behaviour. We started early in the year with the 3rd Brigade responding to Tropical Cyclone Debbie. And there are a number of impressive aspects to that I think are worthy of drawing your attention. The Brigadier Chris Field and his team, in observing and anticipating what fortunately was a relatively slow-moving cyclone, but they took the opportunity to explore with the Army Knowledge Group what had been best practice in DAC response by formations before them. I think that was a really important and mature way to command and control the brigade that then Brigadier Chris Field identified. And as a result, we saw an absolutely textbook demonstration of DAC response, with a pre-positioning of liaison officers, with interaction with the state officials, making clear that it was a state official lead and that we were in support. When the emergency hit, our LOs were out on the ground in place, and what we saw was, as I said, an outstanding textbook response, and a number of units have got great credit and praise from that, including the 3rd Combat Engineer Regiment who were invited back for a freedom of entry into the Whitsundays area afterwards. So we started the year with a demonstration of a very mature command team who understood that they don't have to own all the best ideas that are available, but explored what knowledge had been gained by those who'd gone before, and they set a pretty good example and took that example into their Talisman Sabre preparation. The Army and ADF's performance on Talisman Sabre, I thought, again, was quite exceptional, and we should reflect on just what we achieved there. The generation of amphibious capability, we joined a really exclusive club in the world, advanced armies that are capable of generating an amphibious effect along with their joint partners, particularly Navy. And there are probably no more than about 5 other nations who are capable of doing what we displayed. And it was a demonstration, and of course there will be those who say that we haven't necessarily tested that in the face of a capable adversary, but certainly the generation of that capability has been exceptional. 2 hours performance on that exercise put them at the forefront of Forces Command units, and of course I salute Lieutenant Colonel Doug Pasher and his team, and sadly handed them over to under command of the 1st Division. I only say sadly because handing over a high-performing unit is never easy, but we will see a very significant ongoing generation of expertise in that area as we now normalise amphibious operations into the rest of Forces Command. The performance of the 1st Division headquarters on Talisman Sabre was exceptional. Now, I've had the privilege of serving as a senior embed in Afghanistan for 12 months, moving amongst some of the most celebrated formations in the world in terms of their command and control ability. And I can tell members of Forces Command that what our division headquarters achieved in terms of digital command and control, situational awareness, both air and sea, joint targeting using all the elements of the multi-domain capability available to the Australian Defence Force was quite exceptional. And for those who got a chance to go up there and see it, they will have learned something very significant. And of course, those division headquarters staff that participated. But for all of us, what you can expect more of this year is more cooperation between the division commander and myself as we bring his command and control expertise into Forces Command. So the adaptive army model that was adopted with the creation of Forces Command and the division is starting to finally mature. And I'm very comfortable that Army has a command and control expert, and that is the commander of the 1st Division, and you will see him reaching into courses like the COAC, the Canungra courses, and the ALTC courses as we take that expertise of the headquarters that he has generated. I thought the log construct and the log design on Talisman Sabre was amongst the best I've seen. And the lesson for all of us, you will have read in my priorities this notion of multi-echelon training. There's no good going out onto a large exercise and only exercising the brigade headquarters and having other elements of the force sitting around doing nothing. Through excellent lead-up cooperation in the training design between Headquarters Forces Command, the 1st Division Headquarters and Headquarters 17 Brigade, we generated multi-echelon training design so that what that meant was those elements of 17 Brigade were truly exercised across quite a demanding set of battle space geometry, perhaps for the first true test that we've achieved on a Hamel Talisman Sabre. The lesson for all of us is it's one technique to make an exercise a complete secret to those who participate. I think that's an early or an immature approach. We will get more from bringing our leaders into the training design, making sure that their organisations' training objectives are designed in up front. They don't need to know the details of the tactical behaviour of the Red Force, for example, but we do need cooperation across the echelons in the training design. We did that in particular, particularly well this time with Commander 17 Brigade and Commander 6 Brigade. The 6 Brigade elements on Talisman Sabre 17 again were exercised at a level of reality and granularity that I've not seen other than on an operational setting. So the full exploitation continuum going all the way back to a technical weapons intelligence facility supplied by the Americans, full detainee exploitation, and pushing the results of that exploitation back into the manoeuvre force, again, the best that I've seen. So again, bringing out some of those specific lessons, preparation in advance by looking at the lessons of others, the multi-dimensional training design, bringing in the stakeholder training audience, making sure that their needs are designed in up front, and then allowing them the freedom to participate in the exercise. We've had some very other significant achievements. The advancing of the 16 aviation brigade capabilities have been quite significant over the last 12 or 18 months. My predecessor, General Gus Gilmore, set in place some very specific tempo restrictions to have our aviation units do more of their flying closer to home. It's important that we monitor the outcomes of those restrictions, because that does mean that the rest of our force are seeing less helicopters overhead. But what we've moved from is up to 9 or 10 away from home flying missions, many of which are across a continent, as far apart, if you like, from London to Moscow. What we've done is limit those away from home flying tasks to 3, and in some cases 4, going into support for Special Operations Command. What that has allowed is a very significant increase in capability generation as those units fly closer to home. Now, that does mean that the 3rd Brigade, for example, gets great access to 16 Brigade capability. 1 Brigade gets access to ARH capability, but we don't get the crossover that we normally expect. That is one of the downsides. But what I can tell the command is that the result has been very, very significant. We're seeing record rates of achievement on MRH-90. That is a world-class helicopter. It is going to be an exceptional capability for our Army as it matures. And it includes a range of advanced flying capabilities that are unequaled elsewhere in the world. But one highlight on Talisman Sabre, where over more than 100 nautical miles in marginal weather, we inserted a reconnaissance patrol from an amphibious ship and returned an aircraft safely to the ship, which would not have been possible with a Black Hawk variant or probably any other aircraft of that type in the world. We have a very good helicopter. We've still got some reliability and support issues, but it's progressing very, very well. Unfortunately, the tragic death of 2 German ARH pilots on operations in Mali caused us to suspend flying on the Tiger while we got to the bottom of the cause of that crash. But I'm pleased to say that we have that aircraft back in the air, and you will see a very significant, again, progression in Tiger's rate of effort this year. So 16 Brigade's achievements were one of my highlights going into as we leave 2017 and head into 2018. I was delighted with the emergence of some significant new cultures in our training. And I talk here particularly about the developments in combat shooting. They've started at the School of Infantry with support and input from Special Operations Command, but they have grown out into the deployable force in a really positive way. Of course, I'm excited about the shooting techniques and our ability to hit targets that we point at. That's our core business. But I'm also delighted with what we are seeing about the training behaviour, the relationship between instructors and their trainees. It's an adult relationship. The training that is driven by the needs of the student, and the rates of improvement in combat shooting are very, very significant. And we did a simple trial at Kapuka with a platoon benchmarked on the previous training methodology, which is largely our directive method, and another platoon using the new techniques, and the shooting improved simply by more than 30%. So I'm very excited about how that's progressing. I'm also delighted with how units out there are responding. For example, 1RAR created a combat shooting cell, and instead of putting majors and warrant officers in that cell, the cell was led and comprised of 3 corporals, all of who had been involved in the development of those shooting techniques and were the expert. And I'm delighted to see that we are comfortable identifying expertise at the right level, reinforcing excellence and seeing that progress. And I know 89RR and other units are using a similar approach. So that combat shooting development, but also the collaboration, the training style is an absolute significant advancement that we have made. And I want to see that spreading across the command, where our training approach is driven by the needs of the soldier learning rather than a standoff and directive style. We've made significant developments with our electronic warfare capability, and I won't go into a lot of those on an unclassed means. There's more to come as some of that equipment rolls out, but we've seen some spectrum assessment of the 7th Brigade so that we understand ourselves and our signature. We've got some emerging cyber capability training at the DCSTC, the old School of Signals, and we have some terrific bottom-up innovation in that regard. You'll hear me talk in my priorities for 2018, though, that we've got more to do and we must move faster than we have been up until now. So more to come there. Innovation across the board, I think we're doing, I think as an Army, we're doing pretty well. You will be aware of the DEFOS 17 forum that was conducted in Canberra late in the year, a great innovative forum where we saw pitches made to both the Deputy Chief of the Army and I by ranks as junior as corporals from some of our training centres, you know, all the way through to some more senior officers. The ideas, the courage of those people to get on their feet, and the excitement around some of the discussion and presentation were exceptional. The Army Innovation Day run in Canberra is a very significant event, but I'm most excited by our brigade innovation events. This year we added 6 brigade to that mix, where we saw some really important developments, and next year we will add a forum here at Forces Command that will pick up the TEs, the training centres, because again, when you hear me talk about 18, we've got more to do around training innovation, simulation adoption, and that process. But in the broad, you are coming up with great ideas. My challenge as the Forces Commander is to get you the resources that you need to act on some of those, and that isn't always possible. We don't have a money tree in the grounds at Forces Command, but where we can, we are resourcing those. And a good example is 9 Force Support Battalion identified an excellent situational awareness battle management system for their B vehicle fleet, using largely commercially available tools, but with some specific adoptions. They generated a trial that was demonstrated to me on exercise Talisman Sabre, and we will resource a rollout of that across the rest of 9 FSB this year, and where possible we'll push that into our B vehicle fleets across the command. So that's the sort of innovation that is absolutely exciting. Where we can, we're resourcing it, and I need you to keep pushing up the ideas and giving us that opportunity to find you the means to do those things. I was honoured to be at the presentation of our inaugural Instructor of the Year, the Bob Abood Trophy, to an instructor from our School of Military Engineering, Corporal John Kutner. John was presented that award by Joe Abood. For those of you who don't know, Bob was one of the finest soldiers that I've ever worked with in Armoured Corps, Warrant Officer Class 1, who finished his service as a RSM at the Royal Military College. Sadly has died of cancer. And to see his memory honoured with our one of our best junior NCO instructors was a fantastic development. And I salute DG Tradoc, then Brigadier Mick Ryan, now Major General Ryan, for pulling that together. I was also delighted with our inaugural Command Soldier of the Year event. For those of you who aren't aware, brigades and TEs nominated their best private and lance corporal, and those soldiers got a chance to come down to Forces Command. Now, they thought they were going to be marched around like they're on a Subject 1 course, but actually we were really interested in their opinions about how things were in the command, and they did you incredibly proud by the maturity of their input, the seriousness with which they took it. Most of them had spoken to their peers in order to get a collective sense to pass to us, the senior leaders in the command. Myself, the 2 brigadiers down here, and our collective colonels enjoyed a day of workshopping with those soldiers. They also did some benchmarking activities, got on board the Air Warfare Destroyer, just to understand that we're not the only organisation in the ADF that can generate high quality people. And then we were able to name the 2 soldiers. Now, we could have picked a number of the soldiers that came down, but Lance Corporal Josh Saffin from the 1st Armoured Regiment. Josh had been acting as a troop sergeant for most of the year with his regiment deployed to the Middle East, and had been in command of more than 25 soldiers and a number of armoured vehicles, and was an exceptional young leader. And Private Felicity Marr from Headquarters 3rd Brigade, an intelligence analyst who had been effectively a staff officer for Brigadier Field through Cyclone Debbie and a range of other events. Both soldiers acting well beyond their normal levels of command responsibility. So to those soldiers and to the organisations that nominated them, it was an exceptional performance. So we we have some great people, and we did pretty well. Now, it won't be lost on you that there are often low points in a command cycle, and it is important that we remember we lost 2 fine young soldiers in training accidents last year. Trooper Redden from the 2nd 14th Light Horse was killed in a training accident at Shoalwater Bay when a deadfall tree fell on his vehicle. And we had Private Chalice at the 5th Battalion Royal Australian Regiment killed in a live fire urban assault range. And it is important that we reflect on those 2 losses and learn from that. And I am very pleased with the collaboration that Forces Command has come together on for the range safety review. We have more to do, and that will be one of my priorities in 2018. We also lost too many soldiers to traffic accidents, and we have a national epidemic in this country in youth suicide, and we are not immune to that. So there were plenty of highs in 2017, but it is important that we reflect on the fact that, of course, what we do also comes at a cost. So I said I was going to be fairly frank with you, and in reflection talk about the fact that we do have some things that we need to fix. Let me just talk on those now. The combat shooting discussion that I made, indicating a positive sort of transition to a different leadership model, I think we have more to do. I am essentially challenging ourselves to move to an inspirational rather than a directive leadership style. Now, I'm not going to put a brand around that. There's not going to be a plan to introduce a new leadership model. But as our soldiers evolve, as our young people evolve, as they are better trained, better educated, and more demanding of information, so too must leadership in the command. And in many, many areas, that is the case. So my former RSM, Dave Galloway, had a great question that he asked people as we went around, and I ask you to challenge yourselves in this regard, and that is, what is your plan to inspire your team or your subordinates, today? How are you going into the task that you've been given? What is your plan to inspire the reaction? Now, what do I mean by that? What we clearly are after is that discretionary effort that each of us hold to ourselves. Most people will respond to an order and give you straight up that 75% response. To get the last 15% or last 25%, whatever that discretionary effort is comes through inspiration. So what we're looking for is a leadership model in our command that inspires rather than simply directs. The tools around that they're not revolutionary. They're what good leaders have already done. They pass on their intent so that our subordinates know the why of what they're doing. Leaders demonstrate their own willingness to put themselves in the situation and commit at the same level that they expect of their subordinates. And I love the term leader as a teacher. If you're not teaching out there, you're not leading. And then ultimately, if you're not learning as a leader, then that cycle is not complete. So I seek and encourage us to try and inspire, to lead by example, and live the adage of leader as a teacher or leader as a servant, and explore those formally. No brands, no labels. This is an ongoing transition, and I think we're on a positive journey. Plenty of great examples out there. I'm happy to explore that in questions. One of the weaknesses that is associated with a hard-charging leadership model that is built around exceptional performance, and I think we pride ourselves on that, is we potentially have a leadership model that leads the front 80% of a unit, those that can keep up, but we're missing that back 20% who fall off the back. And my very specific challenge and direction to leaders in Forces Command is you are in charge of your whole unit, and that includes those who aren't keeping up. And the Chief of the Army has given us a mandate and a direction that we are going to lead people who can't keep up through rehabilitation back to work, or we're going to transition them out of the organisation with dignity. But there is not ignore, ostracise, or otherwise neglect. So that is a weakness that comes in high-performance organisations, and we are going to continue to lead everybody in our team. So on the leadership side, I'm looking for inspiration. I'm looking for authentic leaders. I'm looking for leader as a servant, leader as a teacher, and that's the model that I encourage you to generate. The second area of improvement that I think we have more to do is around what I call the operational art. We must be students of our profession. We must be learning. I'm honest with you in saying that our level of tactical acumen, as displayed in things like Talisman Sabre, CPXs and SimXs, is not where I would like it to be. Part of that is a symptom of chasing Taliban around the south of Afghanistan for too long, and we must work harder to remaster all elements of the combined arms team and introduce those new elements of multi-domain capability. And we have more to do. You will see very specific emphasis from Forces Command. We have just run a tactics instructors course to try and generate more excellence in tactical training. You will see very specific attention from people like the Chief of the Army and me at the COAC, and we have more to do. So let's not pat ourselves on the back. As an Army, we have more to do to be masters of the operational art. Logistic doctrine, post-HR decision-making, modern developments of cyber, EW, IO, targeting, etc. I think we can also improve our orders. We have got into some bad lessons with some poorly introduced templates on some of our courses that have introduced American terminology, etc. We need to simplify our orders, and we need to get back to an ability to look somebody in the eye and give them clear direction about what our expectations of them are, about how we think that the mission will play out, and then allow them the freedom to generate their outcome. How do we fix operational art? As I said, you're going to see some specific attention from my level, but at your level, the emerging culture of professional military education is exciting. It's got to continue. We've got to continue to recreate tutes at unit level. Tactical training is not just the role of our TRADOC organisation. It is a unit responsibility. We must embrace the available simulation systems that we've got, and we've got to do that again across echelons. This is not just office of business. We've got to be doing multi-echelon training for our NCOs, our WO senior NCOs and officers, and again, that emerging PME construct is very important. What we're after is the creation of qualified people. That's what we get out of our training system. We then need to add an experiential development to that, so we have qualified, current, competent, and experienced. And the latter parts of that are unit responsibility, and I seek your ongoing commitment into that process. I'd make the observation to you that we have to get into perhaps some boring and mundane training. For those who know me well and follow me on social media, you know I'm a mad keen sports fan across any sport. My main passion is Australian football. But if I watch a sporting team going over and over their set plays in training, in the summer, in the pre-season, in order that in the heat of the game, people can execute those battle drills without thinking. Well, we have a similar set of battle drills. Whether you're a logistic CSST that has to be able to deploy into its CSST configuration in the dark, in the dust, on radio silence and without noise. And that means sometimes people simply getting out on a parade ground, walking and rolling through occupation drills, and then into vehicles on a parade ground, in the daylight, under controlled conditions, and doing it again. And then in the field, doing it again, and then at night doing it again, and making it a muscle memory and routine. The fundamentals of our profession are not always exciting, but they require effort and energy, and this can be done at every level. So whether that's an infantry section commander going through the battle drills, whether that's a combat team commander, or whether that's a formation even executing battle drills, we've got to get over our need for excitement and stimulation and get into some serious muscle memory development in order to be masters of what we do. So set plays, battle drills, routine development, getting our junior leaders out there and getting their team and giving them time to do that. The final point I'll just make in the reflection piece is around role clarity between our officers and our senior NCOs. I think we went through a period in our Army where we got a little bit lost as we tried to develop some of our most senior soldiers into staff officers, and we've had some confusion around our roles. I am clear, and my RSM is clear. We have very specific roles as we move around, and I seek to see the command do more to reinforce those roles. It is there is a clear role for a senior NCO in a formation. I was very pleased to see 3 Brigade using the Brigade RSM as an example. If you're doing a brigade occupation of an assembly area, the critical vulnerability for that brigade is the entry point to the assembly area where there can be confusion. Brigade RSM sent to that location as the most senior soldier in the formation to solve or anticipate any of those problems. That's starting to re-emerge, that sense of our senior soldiers. At company level, the execution or the adoption of defensive routine, senior NCO business, while our officers are thinking about orders and tactics and moving around, talking to and leading their soldiers. The expectation that all of our NCOs and officers come fully trained. The old adage about when you buy a children's toy and on the box it says some assembly required. At unit level, we've got to see ongoing development of our leaders. It is not just the business of our Subject 1 courses. So some assembly required. Let's get into role clarity around our officers and our senior NCOs. So that's a bit of the reflection piece. I know I'm already probably burning my time. There's always more I would love to be able to say, but I do want to leave time for questions. So let me get into 2018. I've done a great job in the command in 17 with the early adoption of Plan Keogh. Now, what Keogh really is following Plan Beersheba. We had Plan Beersheba before the white paper was generated. We got a white paper direction from government, and we had to take that direction and say, right, with the resources available to us, how do we finish Beersheba? And that's what Plan Keogh did. There are some big muscle movements in Keogh and then some smaller stuff. The biggest muscle movement was a return to the infantry of their responsibility for their delivery of their own tactical mobility. That was generated by the reality that we didn't get the size or growth of the army that perhaps we might have sought amongst a range of other priorities. That's entirely a reasonable outcome. So we have taken on that responsibility ourselves in the infantry to generate that capability. That transition is ongoing, and I'll be watching that closely in 2018. But it's time to move beyond just catching up to the now. And really, the regeneration of Beersheba is a good organisational construct for the Combined Arms team. But we've got to get into 21st century Combined Arms, and that is the more rapid generation of the ability for our Army to reach into other domains. So we will see 16 ALR develop very significant air defence capabilities following the government selection of the new air defence weapons. There will be a massive increase in our capability. So as an Army, instead of just defending ourselves, we will now be able to reach out very significant distances and shape the battle space across mobile domains. A future Hamel will include 16 ALR being protected by a manoeuvre formation in order that it can reach across into other domains. And similarly, we have to start thinking the same way in the cyber and IO domains. So Keogh, work to do to finalise those big kinetic muscle movements around the Combined Arms effect. But in 18, you will see significant focus from me in generating our ability to look at our 21st century warfighting capability. That's linked to the second point. The digitisation culture in Army is still on a tipping point. I'll be completely honest with you. I see some units where efforts are embraced and made to make digitisation work. I completely acknowledge that not every unit has the density of digital equipment that it needs, but the recent announcement of Tranche 2 for the rollout of our digitisation system will mean it gets into the schoolhouse, it will get into places like 17 Brigade, and we will achieve a greater density. In the meantime, digitisation is not discretionary. All right, read my lips. We are always going to be a small army. We are going to achieve advantage by knowing at least where we are and what we can do, where possible, knowing what the enemy are doing, and we're going to make decisions about where to apply our small force faster than the enemy. So it is not discretionary. It is something you're going to see very significantly more emphasis from me and the division commander in 2018. The innovation process around the technology, I'm actually pretty happy with. I mentioned to you that we saw some great stuff at the Brigade Innovation Days, including the 6th Brigade. What I seek to do more, what I seek to have is more innovation in 2018 around our training processes. So there are ways we can train and generate ourselves smarter, not all of which require investment in new equipment, but we all know those frustrations. And instead of sitting back saying, well, they are making us do X, let me tell you, I'm they. And together in Forces Command, we own many of the authorities that hold us back or frustrate us. And I'm willing to challenge those. So 2018 is I'm looking for process innovation. Come up with your training ideas and push hard against those points of resistance, because both the Chief of Army and I are adamant that many of the things that hold us back are within our authority to fix. Examples of stuff we're doing to try and help. Last year, I removed 300 non-tech inspections. We will do about another 300 this year out of the cycle. The technical regulatory framework is being significantly simplified down to reduced by about 2/3 in its specified restrictions. We are going to do what we can at my level to create that simplified training environment. But again, a lot of this is going to be bottom-up innovation in our training centres, in our training units, but also in our deployable units, being a demanding customer of us. There is no they. We own these, many of these authorities. I'm delighted with the progress on reserve transformation. A lot of the thinking is done. We've now got to deliver on that. The 8th Brigade, as a training formation in partnership with the Royal Military College, I think is a fantastic and sensible adaptation. We will see a generation of really good quality control across both the reserve and regular components of our training force. Now we've got to deliver. And for those regular formations who are receiving the reinforcing battle group this year, the 7th Brigade, last year the 3rd Brigade. The 3rd Brigade did an extraordinarily good job at receiving, mentoring and facilitating the success of Battle Group Cannon, and I challenged 7th Brigade to do a similar job this year going into exercise Hamel 18. So reserve transformation on track, but more to do, and we've got to reinforce success and make it work. I acknowledge that not all reserve units have access to the world-class equipment that is available in the regular force yet, and we're working hard on that. In the meantime, the regular brigades are going to have to partner and share some of those capabilities. Our professional military education development, the re-emergence of that culture is exciting. And I say re-emergence because it's not new. That PME is a bit of a buzzword, but unit-run training. I was lucky enough to grow up in a unit in the 1st Armoured Regiment where that was routine, and I'm very pleased to see it's becoming increasingly routine across the command. And I license you to leave your units and go away and do professional development. It does two things. It allows you to build a professional capability. It allows you to build a cohesion around the group that has removed itself, and it won't always be officers. I have a similar desire to see RSMs taking NCOs away, for example. And you know what else it does? It shows trust in those subordinates that are left behind to run the unit, that you don't need to be there all the time looking over their shoulder. So, you know, be licensed to take the time away from the tools and develop ourselves professionally. We're linking that into our mess directive, where again I think we've stopped the deterioration of our messes. You should have seen the arrival of 7 new mess supervisors around the biggest messes of Army, as we continue to put resources back into making sure our messes are the appropriate places for us to generate cohesion, professional education, and our ability to mentor each other. You will have heard me, and if you follow me on social media, you'll be aware that I reinforce messages around reducing tempo. Now, we joined the Army to be busy. I like being busy, and there is plenty to do. But we also need to maintain the balance in our professional position, because we are going to get busier. The world is an uncertain place. So if we're running with our foot flat to the floor, the engine revving at the upper rev limiter, and something comes along to make us busier, we've got nothing left to give. Our families are exhausted, we're exhausted, we've used our unit equipment, and there's nothing left to give. I want you to back off the throttle. I want you to maintain your unit equipment. I want you to invest in your families, and I want you to make sure that if we are called on and we need to put our foot on the gas, that you've got something more to give. I was delighted to see Commander 3 Brigade published a lovely little handwritten note that he received from a young lady who thanked him for the release of mum and dad to be at their first day of school. That is a simple illustration of the kind of balance that we can afford to do at the moment because we are not fully committed. But who knows when we will be, so please keep in mind. Now that means some discipline around non-platform support requests. If you're in a TE and a training element, you know that I have scrutinised every one of your non-platform support bids. We've taken between 10 and 15% out of those bids out in the formations. I expect that you will notice a difference, but we need discipline now to make sure that we are willing to sometimes accept the silver-plated training outcome rather than the gold-plated training outcome, if that means some NCOs and officers can be released from a non-platform support bid. Again, I license you to challenge and ask those questions around your tempo. So with that, there's plenty more I could talk to, but I think what I'll do is throw back now to questions.
Thanks, sir. There's a few more questions as we speak. The first question comes from Sergeant Sean Hart at 1RTB. He's in the marksmanship training section. He asks, 1RTB successfully validated the combat marksmanship continuum at the Foundation Combatant Training level during training year 2017. When is the CMC expected to be implemented across the Foundation Combatant Training establishments, IET, and the wider Army? Look,
the answer is 2018 is when I want to see that introduced. It is got a number of dimensions to it, as Corporal Hart will know. There is investment needed in targetry, in movement and moving targets, and the EF88. So the answer to your question is as fast as we can. What I want, where possible, though, in the interim, is let's get on with the training approach and the mindset. For those of you who haven't fired the new LF6 equivalent, and I apologise for not knowing what the new acronym is, but we are moving from a situation where an NCO directs that you will now fire 4 rounds from the nearly unsupported position at the left-hand target to a culture of there are targets to your front, engage. And we're now expecting soldiers to apply fire control principles, shoot the most dangerous targets first and prioritise themselves. That's exactly what we will expect of soldiers in an operational context. So I'm excited, Corporal Hart. You can challenge me to resource to the extent we can the rollout across the command this year. I know it's patchy, but it's now a matter of getting the infrastructure in place. Over.
So the next question is from Captain Birch at the Army School of Transport. He asks, what areas of our all-corps mounted tactics training do you think are low-hanging fruit for improvement?
Look, I get challenged as I go around, and I'll be completely honest. There are some reservations about the move of our mounted combat capability back into the infantry. The theory being that we're overloading ourselves on a training bill. I accept that nervousness, but my experience is that it can be done. I think that we actually had reached a very high watermark with both 5 and 7 RAR, where we were achieving a very high level of mounted combat capability in those units. And without being disparaging of my old corps, as a brigade commander, I think my 3 best mounted manoeuvre units, subunits in the 1st Brigade when I was brigade commander were all mechanised infantry units. Now, there is a period of transition, and one of the things that we must do is we must have a blend between green and black berets. I don't and won't allow the black berets to just disappear and go off and be ACR cavalrymen. I saw an excellent example of that in 7 RAR on Talisman Sabre, where it was irrelevant to the CO who was crewing the vehicle, black or green, and that over time, and that time might be another year, it might be another 2 years, I'd be willing to see the blending of black and green so that we saw a transition of experience across. We have to also, though, make armoured vehicle training more simple and leaner. For example, the principles of getting any vehicle ready are common across a platform of a vehicle. So I've asked for a approach. if you're a P&B crewman and you've understood the principles of preventive maintenance, you've understood how to give orders, move in formation, do you need to be taught all of those things again when you move into a Land 400 vehicle, and then again when you move into a tank? And the answer is no, you don't. What you need to be done is you need to be taught the differences. So preventive maintenance on a wheeled vehicle is X, but the principles of preventive maintenance are the same, whereas on a tank you might have X or Y. So I need our leaders in the mounted training system to find those overlaps, find those efficiencies, and simplify our progression. And my challenge has been similar to the B vehicle, driver training capability. Chief Army's given me a direction to make G-Wagon training simple, as an example. I can go and rent a Pajero four-wheel drive from Rockhampton Airport and go and do a recce of Shoulder Bay. But if I want to get into a G-Wagon, which is essentially a commercial standard four-wheel drive, and drive on the same gravel roads, it takes me about 10 days of training. We have to do better than that. Now, I accept that there might be an off-road driver's component to that, which is specific and we might have to do. But if we should also be able to license someone and meet our WHS requirements to safely operate equipment in a much more lean and simple fashion. That's my challenge to those in the TEs and training centres. Over.
So the next question comes from Major Mark Gilchrist at Headquarters 3 Brigade. He says, what is the issue across the command that keeps you awake at night? And what can we do as leaders to fix it?
Yeah, great question, mate. Look, in the broad, I guess the low point for me as Forces Commander was clearly that point last year where we lost Trooper Redden and Trooper Chalice. But it wasn't just that. We actually lost two other young men to suicide around the same time. And on the safety side, I was immensely proud of the command response. Now, I could be accused of just being seen to react. So we did a safety suspension or a pause of training. Now, some people could say, well, the Forces Command is just knee-jerking. But that's not what the command did. What I was really pleased to see was all elements of the command stopped and actually reflected on the way that we do business and blew the dust off our standing risk assessments. And we took that very seriously. But the most important observation that came from that was that safety is best executed decentralised. And so as we went into Talisman Sabre, not that long after we lost those two boys in training, there was clearly I was very concerned that we might lose another soldier, sailor, or airman. But what we saw was young leaders who were empowered to say, no, I'm nervous about these conditions, I'm going to slow down. Let me give you a simple statistic. There were, and you will remember this, there were, I think, 6 or 7 P&V rollovers on Talisman Sabre. Now, that sounds dramatic, but importantly, they were all at walking pace. So what had happened was commanders of those vehicles or packets had become nervous about the conditions. Too much dust, too many vehicles moving the other way, dark, and those vehicles had slowed down to walking pace. And all of them were simply vehicles that then tipped on their side as they fell into fell off a culvert or whatever. And what that started to show, I mean, I've got to be careful not to add 1 and 1 and get 7. But what that started to show was this kind of empowered junior leader willing to make decisions, and we can make our training as safe and effective as possible. For all of you leaders, particularly those new leaders in 18, just remember that I can't drive safety from my desk at Forces Command. COs can't drive safety from their desk or even their command vehicle out in units. But you can empower your junior commanders to have the authority to step in when something is dangerous and act, and that is when we start to look like a safe organisation. On the other side, we have to address this issue of suicide, and I'm going to be very frank with you all. The national approach to suicide has been silence. There was a situation tragically last year when Dan Vickerman, a very successful Australian rugby player, took his own life. And it was about 2 or 3 weeks before anyone in public would even speak the term suicide in relation to Dan's tragic death. We have to speak about it, and we have to talk to people and lead our way out of this. there is an element of suicide that is a mental health issue, but there are elements of suicide that relate to social exclusion, to isolation, and we can lead and contribute to those. So they're probably the two things that I certainly don't want to repeat in 2018. I want us to bring every young man or woman under our command home safely at the end of every activity. And then I want all of our young people feeling included and feeling able to contribute and able to find help if they're not travelling as well as anyone else. Over.
So the next question is from Corporal Munro at 1RTB, and he asks, how will the Forces Command Resiliency Plan look throughout 2018-19, and how will this affect training at an ab initio level?
So just say that again. I missed the first part of that.
How will the Forces Command Resilience Plan look throughout 2018-19, and how will this affect training at an ab initio level?
Yeah, good question. Another of my priorities, and I haven't spoken about this with the Chief yet, so I've got some work to do on this, but the notion of resilience, I think we've developed a good understanding, and I think we have some micro resilience activities that are best practice. We have the Human Performance Centre at the 3rd Brigade. I like the facilitation course that's run at 1RTB, bringing the best practice out of the adventure training system into the leader development at 1RTB. My challenge as a Forces Commander is how do I industrialise that? And I am going to propose some changes around adventurous training to try and create the opportunity for, let's say, a sub-unit size intervention around resilience. So we're going to continue with things like the facilitation course that you'll be familiar with down at 1RTB. But importantly, I want to see some of that coming across. Let me give you an example, and I'm not, I don't want to overemphasize this, but after Private Chalice was killed at 5 hour, what I would have liked to have been able to do is pull Bravo Company off their tools and put them into a refresh activity. Let's call it, the term we would have used in the past is adventurous training. I think I want to move past that. It's got to be a notion of a resilience development activity. The tool we might use, could be canyoning, could be zip lining and through a waterfall. It could be sea kayaking, but it's that facilitation component with green uniform leaders taking that discussion around. Okay, how did you feel? How are you going to learn to lead yourself? How you then learn to lead your team? So my answer to you is still working on it, and I welcome input, and I'm already talking to the team at Adventurous Training Wing. I want to be able to industrialise the resilience response beyond what is currently a relatively small ability to intervene in certain locations. More to follow. Over.
So the next question is from Lieutenant Colonel Johansson at Aviation Branch. He asks, what is your timeline for Army to be able to declare itself networked?
Well, it's a good question, but I think there will probably be an endless journey. That is, we need to now be in an ongoing development. Those who think you're going to think I'm nerdy after I tell you this next thing, but my holiday reading included a book called The One Device, A History of the Development of the iPhone. And it's quite stunning to look back over just a decade at the incredible advances in technology that have been crammed into a handheld computer processor that we each are so routinely carrying around with us that we take it for granted. We have to have a philosophy of that kind of development. Now, our acquisition approach doesn't always make that easy. We necessarily need to tell government tranches of equipment, get justification for it, and buy it. And so our progression from tranche 1 to tranche 2 of Land 200 has actually taken place over a step change in technology and capability in digitisation. And then you've got the problem of how do you then bridge the gap? And so, we're going to have crossovers between generations of technology in our vehicles. But my answer, so here's my challenge to the leaders in the command. It's not enough just to hand this one over to the geeks and to the 6 staff. We need leaders who can pull this through from the top and understand technology and digitisation. That includes general officers, and that includes, brigade commanders and COs. We have to demand and pull this through. We have to understand it. I had a great discussion with Chris Field during Talisman Sabre, and Chris talked about how his planning had evolved so that the brigade moved, and then he consolidated the generation of his network. And I said to him, so the next step, this is a step that we've got to talk, when I talk about digitisation culture, is generate that network ahead of the movement. So our ability to actually create the situational awareness bubble and then manoeuvre into it. And it's not yet possible with some of our systems and the range of our systems, but with unmanned aircraft carrying repeaters, potentially with small micro UAVs extending the height of our antennas, we have to get to a point where a brigade moves into a situational awareness bubble where it knows at least what it's doing in that space. And so, they're the challenges that we've got as a leadership group. But as a group of leaders, no good living this for the six. We have got to pull this from above. Over.
So the next question is from Chaplain Matthew Stewart at 1 CSSB. He says, it sounds like a contradiction between maintaining a balance and the obvious increase in demands of tasks of time. If we need to better support fatigued members and families, what does that look like?
Yeah, good question, and it is the core of this leadership challenge. So let me give you an example. White paper tells us to increase the rate of international engagement, and as a command, I'm very proud that we responded to that. We've doubled the number of international students coming through our domestic schools. And the Padre will be aware that exercise Harry Hammertook, etc. 1 Brigade now has a very well-developed relationship with the FFDTL in Timor, and we are significantly more partnering with them. 3 Brigade, fantastic relationship with PNG, doubled our rate of training output with the PNGDF, and 7 Brigade will re-emerging into Fiji. So on the one hand, Padre, I'm saying do more international engagement, get up there. But on the other hand, make time for families. And I guess I do need people like Padres, but also commanders to challenge me and my leaders. Now, what I've tried to do is the reduction in the non-platform support bids around the Army, around the command, are going to be real, and we're going to see the difference, and that will mean more people at home. And what I want to see is clever, well-designed training. And again, I'm not picking on 3 Brigade, but obviously I saw a bit of 3 Brigade in 17, and I expect 7 Brigade will replicate this in 18. Chris Field's brigade camp was very well designed, and as soon as a subunit had finished its set of bullring activities, he released it off the range, and they went home and they had some long weekend and some time before Talisman Sabre. And I saw a brigade that hit Talisman Sabre fresh. They were not tired, and as a result, the buy-in, the performance of our people was exceptional. So I'm being selfish as well, Padre. What I see when we are appropriately rested and have the right tempo is we get a much better training buy-in, a much better quality of output. So it is through clever design, like Chris Field showed on Talisman Sabre. When you don't need someone in the field and they've done their bit of the activity, send them home. If you can design the training to go from Monday to Friday, or preferably Monday to Thursday, and then Friday morning you clean some weapons, maybe play a game of sport, and then let people go home at 3 o'clock. Now, again, I'm not naive. I've been around the paddock a few times, and I know this isn't always easy, but it won't work if we just accept the busyness. So it's at every level questioning, do we need to do this? Can we be busy but at home? So while those repetitious training activities I described can be going on, but as long as people are going home at night. And this is one of the things we've seen with the 16 Brigade tempo. They're flying more than they were when they were away, but they're doing it close to home and they're getting home. Now, sometimes they're getting home at midnight, but that's better than not getting home for weeks at a time. All right, so Padre, I hope that helps. And I'm not pretending that I can just wave a wand from here and make this happen, but you will see continual encouragement from me, and that's everything from releasing young people to go and play elite sports, trying to create the conditions for these resilience or adventurous training activities, family days, getting our families out into the field to experience what we do. None of the stuff that I'm talking about is revolutionary or new. These are things that we already do, but we've got to fight our way back into after a very busy period of high operational tempo, which we don't have at the moment, right? This is a relatively achievable operational tempo rate. Over.
So the next question is from Lieutenant Colonel Moody, the CO of 7 SIG Regiment. He says there is a need for close integration of EW, SIGINT, cyber and signature management into the embedded combat brigade training continuum. How can we better integrate these effects into major exercises?
Yeah, great question. And it comes back to the training design. So training design is a skill that had fallen away in Army, and that means I'm going to be coming to the COs of the 6th Brigade COs and saying, as we design Hamel 18, you tell me how best to build your unit into the training design. Now, CO1 Int Battalion last year did that as well as any CO that I've seen. So he came into my headquarters team and said, right, to best exercise the full capability of the Int Battalion, I need the following serials. And they included, he went and got 1,000 captured weapons from DIO, and they were seeded throughout the training audience. He emplaced explosive residue so that the soldiers could discover it. There were SIM cards on cell phones, etc. They could then be passed back to the weapons exploitation lab and so on. Now, that came from specialist training expertise being designed in. So for 7 SIG Regiment, and hopefully Chief may approve a name change for the regiment shortly to bring in the cyber dimension, but I will be expecting you to do the same with Hamel 18. And that's already occurring to a large extent. I was delighted to see 7 Brigade and 7 SIG Regiment get out into 7 Brigade's camp last year and start looking at signature. And to be honest, a bit shocked with what, with how we look. And I won't go into the details on an unclass means, but that came from good collaboration between your unit and Commander 7. And we're going to need more of that. But I will open ourselves up to expert input. You need to come with your coaching of me and my staff about how to design the right exercise outcomes. Over.
So the next question, and will need to be the last question because of time, is from Lieutenant Daisy Andrews at LWC. She says, "Sir, you've spoken a lot about improving training and the concept of continual learning. Do you think there is scope for greater influence from Education Corps officers within training establishments and brigades to work with relevant SMEs to contribute to the design and implementation of training?"
The answer is absolutely. We are doing some work in that regard. So you will see your head of corps, new head of corps, Colonel Fiona Curtis, on my staff, and my view, still being shaped by interaction with your corps and the leadership. I don't need educators as much on the tools running relatively low-level education events, although there might be times when achieving concentration of effect around, for example, maths and literacy programs for NCOs and officers who might be getting ready for a course, that may be appropriate. But what I need from my educators is the best practice of education design. And I think we've made some headway in blended learning. So the adoption of embedded simulation videos. So if we want to do a tactical presentation on a meeting engagement, and we can, we're working through our tablet-based doctrine, we push on a video that shows, the mechanics of a meeting engagement. That's much better than reading. We've made some progress in that regard, but I'm looking for our educators to tell us what is best practice outside of Army on how people are being educated at universities, at TAFEs and in other institutions, so that we get the best bang for our buck. So again, if you've got an interest, get your input up to your head of corps, and there will be forums around that. But what we need from our educators is the how of best practice education, not just the conduct of education activities and events. Okay, look, if that is a wrap. It's a difficult format because I can't see your faces. When you look incredulous and say, "God, he's dreaming," I don't get any feedback. Whereas if you're in the room, I could pick you out. So I hope this has been useful. I think that the generation of the Cove and this mechanism, I think, is a fantastic one. It certainly allows me to reach out in a more direct way, and then perhaps others might be able to watch this when we upload it onto the Cove. I wish you all an effective and safe training year, and I look forward to getting around and seeing as many of you as I can. I hope this has been worthwhile. So thanks very much.